The stagecoach rattled over the dry earth like a wounded beast, its wheels creaking in protest with every rut and stone. Dust clung to everything: Clara Mayfield's bonnet, her dress, even the letter she gripped so tightly that the paper had softened with sweat. She had read that letter countless times during the long journey west, though its words had never grown any more comforting. Mr. Henry Calloway, the man she was to marry, had written in a stiff, businesslike hand. He had not spoken of love or affection, but of partnership and necessity. A rancher needed a wife, and she, a woman with little left back east after her father's death, needed security. That bargain was what had carried her across miles of barren land. Yet as the coach jolted and swayed, Clara felt the first sharp pricks of doubt. She reminded herself of what her aunt back in Missouri had said: "You'll do fine, Clara. A strong man, a roof over your head, food on the table, that's more than most get." But still, her heart fluttered in her chest like a trapped bird. When the coach finally groaned to a halt near a weathered post of split-rail fencing, the driver jerked a thumb over his shoulder. "Calloway Place. End of the line for you, miss." His voice was curt, impatient. He had other deliveries, other passengers to collect, and no time to linger. Before Clara could ask questions, was he certain? Was this truly the right ranch? Her trunk was thumped down in the dust and the whip cracked over the horses. Within moments, the stagecoach was a blur of dust clouds on the horizon, leaving her in silence. Clara shaded her eyes. The land stretched vast and unbroken, painted in burnt shades of ochre and rust. A cabin squatted in the distance, its roof sagging slightly, its windows dark. No plume of chimney smoke, no voices, no welcome. Her heart sank. This could not possibly be the lively ranch of a prosperous man. And yet the driver had spoken with such finality. Still, what choice did she have? Gathering her skirts, Clara dragged her trunk along the uneven path toward the cabin. Each step seemed louder than the last in the thick quiet. The only sounds were the rasp of cicadas and the occasional cry of a hawk circling above. Unseen by Clara, another set of eyes tracked her progress. From the high bluffs that overlooked the valley, a figure watched, motionless as carved stone. He was broad-shouldered, towering, his hair bound with strips of leather, his gaze sharp as flint. Talon, warrior of the Apache, had risen before dawn to scout the borders of his people's land, and what he found was not cattle or settlers' wagons, but a lone white woman stumbling toward a place that no longer belonged to anyone but the earth itself. He did not move closer yet, but his eyes never left her dot at the door of the cabin. Clara paused. The wood was cracked and sun-bleached, the handle stiff with rust. She pushed gently, and the door swung inward with a long groan, revealing nothing but dust motes drifting in slanted sunlight. Abandoned. The air smelled of disuse, of emptiness. She whispered aloud, if only to break the silence. "Hello? Mr. Calloway?" No answer came. Clara sank onto her trunk, her legs trembling with fatigue. Surely the driver must have been mistaken. Yet where could she go? She had no horse, no guide, and the coach would not be back for days. A weight of helplessness pressed against her chest until her throat ached with unshed tears. And still, she felt it, that prickling along the back of her neck that told her she was not alone. She rose quickly, scanning the dry horizon, but nothing stirred. Only the wind brushed over the tall grass. Clara tried to convince herself it was nerves, nothing more. But from the cliffs, Talon's eyes narrowed. In her smallness and lost fragility, he saw not trespass but omen. His people had prayed for a sign, and now one had walked into their valley. He murmured something low in Apache, words carried away on the hot wind. Perhaps the Creator has finally answered. And far below, Clara Mayfield dropped at the wrong ranch. On the edge of a fate she could not yet imagine, lifted her chin against the gathering dusk. determined to endure the night alone. Night came quickly in the desert, as though the sun had been snuffed out rather than simply set. One moment the horizon glowed orange, the next it lay swallowed in purple shadows. Clara Mayfield huddled inside the cabin, her trunk pushed against the door like a meager shield. She had found a stub of candle in her sewing kit, its flame wavering bravely against the vast dark. Every creak of timber made her heart leap. She told herself it was only the wind, only the settling of old boards. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes pierced the thin walls. Outside, those eyes belonged to Talon. From the cover of mesquite and stone, he studied the small figure silhouetted against the candlelight. She looked fragile, almost breakable, but there was something in the set of her shoulders that caught his attention. Fear lived in her. Yes, but not surrender. Talon was no stranger to the settlers who pressed westward like a tide that could not be stopped. He had seen men with rifles and greed, women who clung to wagons, children who wailed. They built fences. Across the land his people had roamed for centuries, fencing off waterholes and grazing trails. But this woman had come alone, delivered by fate to a cabin no white man had touched in years. He felt no anger toward her, only curiosity, threaded with something heavier, something he could not yet name. Clara, unaware of her watcher, forced herself to breathe evenly. She drew her father's Bible from the trunk and opened it on her lap. Its pages, worn from years of his touch, steadied her. By the flicker of the candle, she whispered prayers half aloud, both for protection and for courage. Her voice was a tremulous thread in the silence. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Talon listened. Though he did not understand all the words, he recognized their cadence. His grandmother had taught him that the Creator listened to all tongues when spoken with truth. Perhaps the woman's prayers were meant not only for herself, but for him and his people as well. When the moon climbed high, casting silver light across the valley, Talon moved closer. Silent as the panther, he descended from the ridge and crossed the open ground. His moccasins left no sound on the earth. At the cabin's wall he paused, one hand resting lightly on the logs, as if feeling the pulse of the stranger within. Inside, Clara stiffened. She heard it so faint she almost doubted herself, the sound of breathing that was not her own. She held her breath, straining, and the candle guttered as though reacting to her fear. Her fingers tightened on the Bible, but she did not cry out. Minutes stretched. Then, just as quietly, the presence outside shifted away. Talon retreated, though not far. He would not yet show himself. The time had to be right. For now, he would watch until dawn. His instincts told him the woman was not lost by accident. No, she had been sent whether by God, the spirits, or fate itself. As the first chill of desert night settled, Clara wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. She lay down on the hard floor, candle extinguished, Bible clutched to her chest. Her body trembled with exhaustion, but her mind spun with questions. Where was Mr. Calloway's ranch? Why had she been left here? And most haunting of all, why did she feel as if someone, unseen yet near, had been standing guard? On the cliffs once more, Talon folded his arms across his chest and fixed his gaze upon the small darkened cabin. His people had prayed for help, for healing, for hope. Now, as he watched the settler bride sleep, he whispered to the stars, "If this is your answer, Creator, I will protect her with my life." By the time the pale gray of dawn seeped through the cracks in the cabin walls, Clara's limbs ached from the hard floor. She rose stiffly, brushed the dust from her skirt, and peered through the warped shutters. The valley looked almost gentle. In the morning light, the cruel edges of the desert softened by mist that hovered low to the ground. For a moment, she almost believed yesterday's unease had been nothing more than travel fatigue and imagination. Her stomach, however, made plain. Reality. She had eaten little since leaving the stagecoach station, and now hunger gnawed at her with relentless sharpness. Surely, she thought, Mr. Calloway's ranch hands would come looking when they saw she had arrived. Perhaps this cabin was only an outbuilding, a way station. Gathering courage, Clara pushed the door open and stepped into the brightness. The silence pressed against her ears. No cattle lowed, no chickens clucked. Only the sigh of wind across empty land. She walked slowly around the cabin, searching for signs of life, a plow, a bucket, footprints. But all she found were weeds bursting between stones, and the remnants of a corral long since collapsed. "This can't be it," she whispered. "It can't." She thought of turning back along the track where the stage had dropped her, but the distance was too great to walk, and she had no idea where it led. Her best hope, she reasoned, was to remain here until anyone found her. With that resolve, Clara approached the cabin again, intent on making it livable for a day or two. When she pushed the door wider, sunlight streamed in and illuminated the interior more clearly than the dim candlelight had the night before. That was when she noticed it. The walls bore markings faded paint, symbols she did not recognize, patterns of spirals and lines. They were not random scratches but deliberate designs etched with care. In the far corner, feathers and stones had been bound together with strips of leather hanging like charms. Clara froze. This was no settler's dwelling. It had been claimed, consecrated even, by people who had been here long before her. A chill prickled over her skin. She had heard enough stories on the trail, stories of Apache raids, of scalps and burned wagons. Women whispered them in the dark, half horror, half fascination. Yet as she stood in that silent space, surrounded by tokens of a people she did not understand, what she felt was not menace but the weight of trespass. She should not be here. Her lips trembled as she whispered into the emptiness, "Forgive me. I didn't know." High on the ridge above, Talon watched her once again. From the moment he saw her step into the cabin, his chest had tightened. That dwelling was no ordinary shelter. It had been built by settlers years ago, abandoned after a harsh winter. His people had taken it back, not as a home, but as a place of prayer, a space where elders sought visions. For a stranger to walk through its doorway was no small thing. And yet, she had walked in without fear of them, ignorant of the boundary she crossed. That ignorance should have angered him. Instead, when he saw her small frame pause before the sacred symbols, her lips moving as though in apology, something shifted within him. She had not entered with arrogance. She had entered with need. Clara sank onto her trunk, pressing her hands to her face. Panic threatened to well up, but she forced it down. If she gave in now, she would be lost. She needed clarity, a plan. Perhaps she could make a fire smoke would draw attention. Or she could gather what herbs and roots she remembered from her father's teaching. Yes, survival first. Then, when someone came, she would explain the mistake. But as she moved to the doorway, ready to fetch kindling, a low murmur rode the breeze. A voice. She froze, eyes sweeping the horizon. The sound had been faint, almost like a whisper, yet she was certain it was real. She clutched the Bible against her chest, her breath shallow. "Who's there?" The land gave no answer, only silence stretching endless. But Talon, hidden in the rocks, had spoken softly to the wind, testing the bumbund, testing the rocks, had spoken softly to the wind, testing the wind, testing the wind. Weight of words he had not spoken in years. The Creator has sent you to the right door, woman, though you do not yet see it. By the time the sun sank behind the bluffs, Clara's nerves were frayed to threads. She had managed to gather a small pile of dry brush and start a meager fire outside the cabin, though the smoke stung her eyes and smelled more of desperation than comfort. She roasted nothing. There was nothing to roast, but she warmed her chilled hands at the flames, until darkness crept once more across the valley. The silence was deeper tonight, heavy as a blanket. Every gust of wind rattling the cabin walls seemed louder than it should have been. Clara sat on her trunk inside, Bible still pressed close, whispering verses just to hear the sound of her own voice. Then it came, the faint crunch of a footfall. She stiffened, every muscle taut. This was no settling timber, no harmless trick of her nerves. Someone was outside. She could feel it as surely as she felt her own heartbeat. Her breath quickened. Should she scream? Run? Pray harder? Her eyes darted to the single candle stub, trembling in its brass holder. The door creaked. Clara nearly dropped the Bible. Slowly, steadily, the door eased open, though she had wedged her trunk against it. A shadow filled the threshold, tall and broad, a presence too large to be mistaken for her imagination. Her breath caught. The man stepped into the faint light. He was unlike any man she had ever seen towering, his frame carved with strength, his dark eyes glinting in the dim glow. His hair, bound with leather, fell across his shoulders, and his skin held the burnished bronze of the desert itself. An Apache. The word rang in her mind with both fear and awe. Clara rose unsteadily, clutching her Bible as though it were a weapon. I mean no harm. I was told this was Mr. Calloway's ranch. Her voice faltered. Under the weight of his silence, for a long heartbeat, he only studied her, his expression unreadable, his chest rising and falling with slow certainty. Then, in a voice low and resonant, he spoke words that stunned her more than any threat could have. God finally sent you to us. The words seemed to echo inside the small cabin. Clara blinked, not sure she had heard correctly. What? His gaze did not waver. You were not lost. You were sent. My people prayed, and now you are here. Clara shook her head, her pulse thundering in her ears. No, you're mistaken. I came on the stagecoach. I was supposed to meet my husband-to-be. I think they left me at the wrong place. I don't belong here. A faint curve touched his mouth, though it was not quite a smile. Wrong place? There is no wrong place. Only the place the Creator chooses. The calm certainty in his tone unnerved her more than anger would have. I can't stay here, she whispered, half to herself. I need to find Mr. Calloway. He'll be looking for me. The Apache warrior tilted his head as though weighing her words against something unseen. At last he said softly, If this Calloway is meant for you, then why did the wind bring you to us instead? Clara had no answer. She swallowed hard, clutching her Bible tighter, her thoughts whirling. This man was dangerous, wasn't he? He had the strength to snap her in two, yet his voice was gentle, almost reverent, as though he truly believed. What he said. I don't even know your name, she managed. Talon, he said simply. Then, after a pause, and you are Clara. Her heart skipped. How do you know? Because the Creator told me, he said, his dark eyes steady upon her. For a long moment, the cabin was silent but for the soft hiss of the dying fire outside. Clara's fear and confusion tangled with something else she could not name, a trembling awareness that this meeting, this man, might indeed be no accident. She drew in a shaky breath. If I stay, what is it you expect of me? Talon stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for her ears. Not what I expect. What was promised. You will see soon enough. Clara's world tilted with every word Talon spoke. His presence filled the cabin, not with violence, but with an authority that made her knees tremble. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that her place was with Mr. Calloway, that she was only here by mistake. But her voice caught in her throat, and before she could gather it, Talon reached down and lifted her trunk as though it weighed no more than a loaf of bread. Wait! she cried, darting forward. "That's mine. What are you doing?" "You will come," he said simply, turning toward the door, her pulse hammered. "Come where?" "To my people. They wait for you." "No." She planted her feet, though they quivered beneath her. "I can't. You don't understand. I was sent here for a man, a rancher. His name is Henry Calloway. He's expecting me. I can't just—" Her voice cracked, shame rushing through her at the absurdity of her words. She sounded like a child stamping her foot. Talon turned back, eyes dark and steady. "And yet Calloway is not here. The ones who are here are us. You belong where the Creator places you, not where a man's letter claims you." The blunt certainty of it left Clara stunned. How could he speak as though her whole future were nothing but a scrap of paper carried on the wind? She thought of the letter still folded in her trunk, Calloway's stiff, practical sentences. "A woman of strong character will find no hardship at my side." He hadn't written of love or kindness. Only terms of a bargain, but wasn't that what she had agreed to? Security in exchange for companionship? Had she really come so far west to be given away like cattle? Talon watched the war play across her face. His voice softened, though it still held iron. "You fear us? I see it in your eyes, but hear this, you will not be harmed. Not by me, not by my people. The Great Spirit has shown us your coming. You are answer to prayer, not prisoner." Clara's hands tightened around her Bible. "If I go with you, you promise no harm?" He inclined his head, solemn. "I promise." Every instinct screamed against it. And yet, what choice did she have? Alone in the cabin, she had no food, no horse, no direction. At best, she would wither before help arrived. At worst, she would be found by others less merciful. Reluctantly, she allowed him to lead her outside. The moonlight silvered his broad shoulders as he carried her trunk, guiding her down a path she hadn't noticed before, winding toward the valley's heart. Clara followed, her steps hesitant but steady. The walk seemed endless. Coyotes yipped in the distance, and the wind carried scents unfamiliar: sage, smoke, the faint tang of horses. At last the land opened into a clearing lit by small fires. Figures moved about, shadows of men, women, and children. Their heads turned as Talon entered with Clara trailing behind. A hush fell. Clara froze under their gaze. The weight of so many eyes pressed down on her, some wide with wonder, others narrowed with suspicion. Whispers rippled through the gathering. An elderly woman stepped forward, her hair braided with gray and her back bowed, but her presence commanding. She studied Clara for a long moment, then lifted a hand to Talon. "So, she has come." Clara blinked. "She?" The woman's dark eyes softened with something like pity. "We asked the Creator to send us healing, a hand to tend our sick, a spirit to guide our little ones, and now He has answered." Murmurs spread through the people, some agreeing, some doubtful. Clara's heart pounded. She wanted to shout that it was all a mistake, that she was no healer, no guide, just a lost woman meant for another man. But when she opened her mouth, no words came, because deep inside, where fear and hunger gave way to something quieter, Clara felt a strange flicker. Not belonging, but calling. And that frightened her most of all. The Apache camp pulsed with quiet energy. Clara felt it the moment she crossed the circle of firelight, every eye on her, weighing her presence. The warmth of the flames barely touched the chill crawling her spine. She clutched her shawl tighter, aware of her foreignness in every detail. Her pale skin, her calico dress smeared with dust, the stiff bonnet still hanging awkwardly from her neck ribbon. Talon set her trunk gently near one of the lodges, then stepped back, as though his part in bringing her here was finished. Clara wanted to call after him, demand he explain what would become of her, but her pride held her silent. Better to appear composed than to let them see her unravel. The elder woman who had spoken earlier, her name whispered as Mother Elk. By those nearby came forward again. In her lined face Clara saw wisdom, but also sharpness, like a hawk that could pierce flesh with its beak if needed. "You come at a hard time," Mother Elk said, her English thick but clear. "Our people weaken. Cough takes the young. Fever takes the old. We prayed for help." She gestured at Clara's small hands. "And the Creator sent these." Clara's mouth went dry. I'm no healer," she said quickly. "I know a little of herbs from my father's teaching. But Her protest broke as a woman hurried from one of the lodges, carrying a child limp in her arms. The boy's face glistened with sweat, his eyes half shut, his breathing ragged. The mother knelt at Clara's feet, desperate, pleading. In a tongue Clara did not understand. Clara staggered back a step, overwhelmed. No, I can't." But then the child coughed weakly, and the sound pierced her heart like a knife. Memory surged unbidden. Her father bent over a sick neighbor, teaching Clara how to crush willow bark for fever, how to cool a brow with damp cloth. She had been only a girl, but she remembered. Her hands moved before her mind caught up. She knelt beside the boy, pressed her palm to his forehead burning hot, and turned to the mother. "Water, cool water," she mimed, touching her lips, then making a pouring motion. Understanding flickered, and within moments a gourd of water was thrust into her hands. Clara worked with clumsy urgency. She dampened cloth torn from her hem, laid it across the boy's brow, coaxed small sips of water between his lips. She murmured, as much to herself as to him, "You'll not give up, not tonight." Around her, the camp had fallen silent. Warriors, mothers, children, they all watched as though the outcome of one child's fever would decide the truth of her place among them. Talon stood apart, arms folded, his gaze never leaving her. Hours seemed to stretch as Clara tended the boy. She brewed a bitter tea from willow bark and sage she found in a pouch near the fire, praying she had remembered correctly. She whispered scripture under her breath, not caring who heard, each verse a thread binding her fraying courage. "Heal me, O Lord, and I shall be healed. Save me, and I shall be saved." At last, near dawn, the boy's breathing eased. His skin, though still warm, cooled slightly under her touch. His eyes fluttered open, just enough to meet his mother's tear-filled gaze. The woman sobbed with relief, clutching Clara's hands and pressing them to her lips. Clara swayed, exhaustion threatening to topple her, but she steadied herself. Around her, the murmurs began not of suspicion now, but of awe. Mother Elk's voice cut through the whispers. "The Creator has spoken. She is the one." Clara shook her head, trembling. "No, I only did what I could." "Anyone," Talon stepped forward, his shadow falling across her. His voice was low, but it carried to every ear. "Not anyone, you." Clara's throat closed. She had wanted only to survive, to find the man she was promised to. Yet, in this moment, under the weight of so many gazes, she realized she had crossed a threshold. She was no longer simply a lost bride waiting to be claimed. She was something else, and that truth terrified her more than the fever ever could. Clara had begun to lose her sense of time in the Apache village. Days bled together, measured not by clocks or church bells, but by the rhythm of fire, water, and sky. She helped gather herbs with the women, learned which plants soothed burns, which eased coughs. Children trailed after her with wide eyes, whispering as though she were some figure from a story. She told herself it was temporary, that soon she would be returned to the path fate had first promised. And yet she no longer felt like a stranger every time she bent over a sickbed or soothed a frightened child. Still, she had not forgotten Henry Calloway. Every night, when she lay awake listening to coyotes howl, she wondered if he searched for her. or if he had simply assumed she'd broken faith. The thought twisted her stomach with guilt. The answer came one late afternoon. A cry rose from the outer edge of the Camp Scouts returning at speed. Clara stood from the herbs she was sorting just as riders appeared, dust swirling around the hoofs of their horses. But these were not Apache. These were men in wide-brimmed hats and boots, rifles glinting in the sun. At their head sat a thick-shouldered man with a bristled jaw and eyes like hard coins. Henry Calloway. Clara's heart lurched. She recognized him from the daguerreotype tucked in her letter. He was older, heavier, his skin weathered by sun and whiskey, but it was him, Clara Mayfield. He barked the moment he saw her, his voice carrying over the camp. "By God, there you are. I've been half out of my mind thinking you'd been taken. And here you are, living among them like a runaway." Heat flamed in her cheeks as every Apache head turned. Talon emerged from the shadows near the council lodge, his expression tightening into stone. "I wasn't," Clara began, but Calloway cut her off. "You belong to me, girl," he said, swinging down from his horse. Dust rose around his boots. "I sent for you, paid your passage, and you were promised. That makes you mine." The words landed like a slap. Belong. Promised. His tone carried no affection, no gratitude, only ownership. Talon stepped forward, his massive frame a wall between Calloway and Clara. "She is not yours." Calloway's face darkened, and his men shifted their rifles. "You stay out of this, savage. You don't get to keep what belongs to me." A murmur rippled through the Apache camp anger. Warning, the low rumble before a storm. Children were pulled behind mothers. Warriors' hands brushed the hilts of their knives. Clara felt the tension coil tighter, ready to snap out. Her voice trembled, but she forced it out. "Mr. Calloway? I came west because I believed we had an agreement. But I never agreed to be property." Calloway's jaw clenched. "What else would you call it? A woman's place is to serve. You'd have had a warm house, food, and safety. And now look at you living in filth among heathens." The words cut sharper than any blade, not only for her but for those around her. She felt the shift in the air as Apache eyes hardened. Talon's voice dropped to a growl. "You insult her. You insult us. Leave now." Calloway spat in the dust. "Not without what's mine. She walks out of here with me, or I take her by force." Clara's breath caught. Every instinct told her to flee, to hide, but she stood rooted between the two worlds that now pulled her apart. Calloway's claim cold and transactional. Talon's protection fierce and unyielding. The elder Mother Elk rose from her place by the fire, her frail frame seeming to grow taller as she spoke. "The woman is not yours to take. The Creator has already claimed her." But Calloway only sneered, signaling his men to ready their rifles. The air cracked with the sound of cocked hammers. Clara's pulse thundered in her ears. She knew the moment had come. If she did not speak, blood would fall like rain on this dry ground. And the choice of whose blood it rested on her. The air in the clearing felt tight enough to shatter. A ring of eyes fixed on Clara, Apache mothers holding children close. Young warriors gripping spears, Calloway's men with rifles raised, Talon standing like an immovable wall between her and danger. And at the very center of it all, she herself, trembling but rooted, as though the ground beneath her would not let her flee. "Speak, Clara," Calloway barked, his voice sharp as a whip. "Tell them you're coming with me. That's what you signed up for. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Signed up." The words twisted in her gut. Yes, she had written her name, agreed to travel west to be his wife. But as she looked at Calloway now, the greed in his eyes, the possessiveness in his tone, she realized that agreement had been built on desperation, not choice. Her father gone, her future uncertain, she had grasped at survival like a drowning woman clutches. Driftwood. Was that love? Was that destiny? Talon's voice broke into her thoughts, deep and steady. Clara owes you nothing. A promise made in fear is not a promise at all. Calloway spat in the dust. She's white like me. She don't belong here among savages. What kind of fool would choose dirt over a ranch? Heathens over her own kind? Clara flinched at the venom in his words. She glanced around the circle of Apache faces, some wary, some expectant, all waiting to see what she would say. The boy she had tended days earlier peeked out from behind his mother's skirts, his fever-burned cheeks now flushed with life. His small eyes met hers with a kind of trust that made her throat tighten. Her heart pulled in two directions. One path was known, a rancher's house, a roof, the promise of meals and survival, if not affection. The other path was wild, uncertain, yet here she was seen not as property, but as something more, a healer, a gift, a woman whose hands could shape life and death. Mother Elk's voice came, soft but cutting through the tension like a blade. The Creator gives each heart two voices. One whispers fear, the other whispers truth. Which one will you follow, child? Clara swallowed hard. Her hands shook as she clutched her Bible, the pages trembling with her. She prayed silently, Lord, show me the way. Not what others claim, not what they demand, but what you would have me do. The silence stretched until it nearly broke her. Then, with a breath that seemed to scrape her very soul, Clara lifted her chin and spoke. I am not property. Her voice cracked, but she forced it steady. I will not be claimed like cattle. I will not walk back to a house where I am wanted, only for what I can provide. Calloway's face twisted with rage. You ungrateful little. But Clara raised her voice, stronger now, carrying across the camp. I came here lost. I thought I was left at the wrong place. But perhaps it wasn't wrong. Perhaps it was where God intended me to be, among people who see me as more than a bargain. Gasps rippled through the Apache. Talon's eyes glowed with fierce pride, though he said nothing, allowing her words to stand on their own. Calloway's fists clenched. You'll regret this, girl. I'll be back with the law at my side. And when I come, they won't protect you. Then let the law come, Talon said, stepping forward, his stance like a drawn bow. We are not afraid. The tension held, a taut string ready to snap, until at last Calloway snarled a curse and jerked his reins. His men followed, though not without casting dark looks over their shoulders. Hooves thundered into the distance, leaving only dust behind. The camp exhaled as one. Clara's knees wobbled, nearly giving way, but she held herself upright. Her choice had been spoken. There was no turning back. Talon approached her slowly, his voice low enough for only her to hear. You have walked through one fire, but another comes. Be ready, Clara. And though his words chilled her, part of her heart strange and wild felt lighter than it had in years. Dawn broke red over the horizon, the kind of crimson sky that made old warriors mutter of omens. The Apache camp stirred uneasily long before the sun cleared the bluffs. Even the children seemed to sense what was coming, their play subdued, their eyes clinging to their mother's skirts. Clara felt the tension like a stone in her chest. She had not slept. She had lain awake inside one of the lodges, listening to the restless movements outside, the hushed words exchanged between Talon and the scouts. Each whisper carried the same weight. Calloway would return, and he would not return alone. When Clara finally stepped into the cool morning air, she saw the warriors already gathered, bows strung, rifles polished, faces painted with black and red. Talon stood at their head, calm and immovable, a mountain carved in human form. His dark eyes lifted to her, and though he gave no smile, his gaze steadied her. "You do not need to see this," he said quietly as she approached. Clara drew her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "If this is because of me, then I do." A flicker of respect passed across his features, and he inclined his head. "Then stand, but stand firm." The warning cry came mid-morning. Scouts on the ridge signaled with raised arms. Riders, 20 or more, kicking up a storm of dust. The settlers had returned, armed and ready. At their head thundered Calloway, his jaw set, his eyes alight with grim purpose. Behind him, men carried rifles and pistols, some with sheriff's stars pinned to their coats, whether bought or borrowed. Clara could not tell that the riders reined in just beyond bowshot. Calloway's voice rang across the valley. "I gave you a chance to hand her over peaceful. Now I take her." The Apache line did not flinch. Talon stepped forward, his massive frame a living shield between Calloway and the camp. "She has chosen." "She is not yours? Chosen?" Calloway barked a laugh, bitter and sharp. "She don't know what she's doing. She's been bewitched by your heathen lies. But the law's on my side." He lifted his rifle high, its barrel catching the morning light. "One last chance. Send her out, or we burn this camp to the ground." Clara's throat tightened. She felt every eye in the village on her. For a heartbeat, fear nearly unmanned her. If she stepped forward, perhaps blood could be spared. If she surrendered, the children would not have to hide behind their mothers, the warriors would not have to die for her. But then she thought of the boy she had nursed back from fever, of Mother Elk's unwavering faith, of Talon's whispered words in the cabin. "God finally sent you to us." Her fear broke like glass under a hammer. She stepped forward, past the line of warriors, until she stood beside Talon. Her voice rang out, thin but fierce. "I will not go with you, Henry Calloway. Not now, not ever." The words seemed to hang in the air, bright and unshakable. A murmur rippled through the Apache. Calloway's face darkened with fury. "So be it." He jerked his rifle down. "Men," time fractured. Settlers raised their guns. Warriors drew their bows. The valley rang with the sudden terrible crack of rifles and the answering hiss of arrows. Smoke curled into the sky. Horses screamed. Clara flinched at the first shot, but Talon's arm swept her back behind him, his body a wall against the storm. "Stay low," he commanded. The Apache fought like the land itself, silent, swift, relentless. Arrows found their marks with deadly precision. Settler rifles boomed, felling 2 warriors, but the line did not break. Talon's rifle barked once, twice, each shot deliberate, each strike true. Through the chaos, Clara's eyes locked on Calloway. He rode forward, bellowing, his rage unhinged. His rifle swung toward her. "No." The cry tore from her throat. But before the trigger could fall, Talon was there. With the speed of a striking hawk, he hurled his tomahawk. It spun through the air, catching the rifle, knocking it from Calloway's grip. The weapon clattered uselessly to the dirt. The settlers faltered then, shaken by the ferocity of resistance. One by one, they turned their horses, retreating under the weight of arrows and unyielding resolve. Dust swallowed them as they fled, leaving only silence broken by the groans of the wounded. The Apache camp exhaled, though wariness lingered. Blood had been spilled, and peace was fragile. Clara stood trembling, staring at the place where Calloway had vanished into the dust. She had spoken her choice, and it had nearly cost lives. Yet as Talon turned to her, his chest heaving, his hand steady as it reached to touch her arm, she knew the cost would have been greater had she stayed silent. "You stood firm," he said, and though her knees shook, Clara met his gaze. "So did you." For the first time since she had met him, Talon's lips curved into something close to a smile. The smoke of battle still hung in the morning air, curling through the cottonwoods, mingling with the copper scent of blood. The Apache moved quietly among the fallen, tending the wounded, whispering prayers for the dead. Clara's hands were not still for hours, ripping cloth into bandages, pressing wounds, murmuring comfort to men who groaned through clenched teeth. She had seen suffering before, back in the cities of the East, but never with such immediacy, never with such weight pressing on her chest. These were no strangers. These were people who had given her shelter, who had treated her as one of their own. When at last the worst was tended, Clara sat near the fire, her hands stained red, her body trembling from exhaustion. Across the clearing, Talon spoke with the council, his voice low but carrying authority. When he turned at last, he walked toward her, every stride deliberate. He looked as though the battle had left no mark on him, yet Clara saw the heaviness. In his eyes, the burden of leadership, of choices that cost lives. He crouched beside her. "You are unhurt?" Clara nodded faintly. "I'm fine." "But so many." Her throat tightened. "You saved lives today," Talon said. "You stood as one of us. Do not carry shame where honor belongs." His words were steady, yet his gaze lingered on her with something deeper, something unspoken. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. She looked down at her stained hands. "If Calloway comes back, he will not," Talon cut in. "He has seen our strength. He has lost face before his men. He will not return soon, if ever." The certainty in his tone should have comforted her. But more than Calloway's threat, Clara feared the question that now loomed larger than any battle. What now? That night, after the fires dimmed and the camp grew still, Mother Elk summoned Clara to her lodge. The elder's eyes glowed like embers in the lamplight. "The Creator brings people together with purpose," the old woman said. "You were sent here, not by mistake, but by design. You feel it, do you not?" Clara swallowed, her voice a whisper. "I don't know what to call it. I feel torn in two. But when I look at these people, at him, I feel like I've found something I didn't even know I was searching for." Mother Elk smiled faintly, then stopped running from it. "A covenant is not chains. It is a choice freely made. You have the right to choose yours." The words sank deep, lighting a flame in Clara's chest. The next morning, with the camp gathered in a wide circle, Clara stood at Talon's side. He spoke first in his own tongue, words that Clara could not understand but felt with her bones, something about strength, about unity, about the Creator's gifts. Then he turned to her, his gaze steady, waiting. Clara's heart pounded. She clutched her Bible in both hands. "I came here thinking I had been lost, that I'd been sent to the wrong place. But I believe now it was the right place all along. I will not be claimed by fear or by bargains. I choose to stay. I choose to give myself to this people and to you." Her voice wavered, but her words carried clear across the circle. The Apache murmured, some in surprise, some in approval. Mother Elk closed her eyes in satisfaction. As though she had been waiting for this moment all along, Talon stepped closer, towering above her, yet his hand when it touched hers was gentle. "Then we make covenant, not of chains." There, hands clasped, a vow sealed not with ink or law, but with witness, with fire, with the weight of the earth itself. For the first time in years, Clara's chest felt unbound. She had stepped into a new life, one not chosen for her, but chosen by her. The sky stretched wide above, limitless, and she whispered a prayer of thanks, not for safety, not for ease, but for freedom. Talon's deep voice rumbled beside her. "The Creator sent you, and now you are home." And in that moment, Clara knew he was right.